latest special edition vehicle by Ford, and it's the EcoSport Active. It has recently been added to the EcoSport range, and I have to say, you know what? At some point I thought Ford is giving us too many special editions. You know, we've seen this with the Ranger, we've seen this with the Everest, as well as the Raptor as well. And I have to say, you know, initially I thought, why? But you know, now as I'm sitting here, because I've seen how consumers are responding to these special editions, I have to applaud like whoever was sitting in the boardroom there and deciding that to keep these vehicles running for longer, because they've been here for quite some time, we need to create some form of special editions. It's working. People are responding well to this. People are buying it. So I'm just clapping hands for whoever has decided that this is the strategy that they're going to go with. Otherwise, welcome to the channel. It's We're Behind the Camera, and I appreciate that you're here with me today. So we're going to be focusing on where this car fits the competition, you know, the features, what changed, what didn't change, and how it drives, of course, on tar road and on gravel road. And yeah, we'll just be talking about the car overall, right? You know how we do things here. We're having a conversation as we are driving. So, you know, EcoSport comes in 3 variants. It comes either you get the lower spec Ambiente, or you get the Trend, which is the mid spec, or the Titanium then, which is the top spec, right? This one, because the special edition is based on the mid spec Trend variant. And that's where then it slots in. In terms of pricing, it slots in just below the Titanium variant because it's not necessarily a top spec vehicle. To get to the Titanium from this particular one in terms of price point, you're going to add around 8,000, I think, to get to the Titanium manual, and then more than 20,000, just more than 20,000 to get to the Titanium Auto. But if I was to base my conclusion on looks, I still say this is wow, this looks amazing. I mean, what they've added over the EcoSport range is this cladding that is just around the car, and it's adding to that visual appeal. And can we just look at these rims? I mean, these 17-inch wheels are new, of course, to the Trend variants based on this Active, and they look amazing. I think that part alone for me, it's adding a lot of visual appeal. I mean, the stance of the car is much better. When you're looking at it, the side profile, it's just amazing. But what else did they add? They've added like the black styling. Of course, they put the Active badging on the side of the car as well to show you that this is an Active variant. And then you're looking at, like I'm saying now, the black styling, which is now you're looking at the mirrors, they're covered in black. The roof is contrasting well with this paint. This paint is called Lux Yellow, by the way. It's just adding well. I mean, this is black and gold. It looks rather amazing in this paint. Looking at it then, you can see then that there's privacy windows at the back, which are adding to that black styling from outside. And now going to the front, you'll see the grille as well is black, it's not chrome, and there's insets on the lights as well that are black. Those are the things that they've added on the outside. Coming inside though, you're going to find that there is not much that is changed, but when you're looking back facing the seats, you'll see that there are changes there. Of course, there's leather seats now in this variant, and there's engraved in A. I think, of course, it's representing what? The Active variant. But when I'm looking at the dashboard itself, you know, this car has been around for quite some time. I mean, Ford has kept this car for a long time. I mean, it's a 9-year-old car. It has been facelifted once when they were giving us the Fiesta. You know, when the Fiesta came around 17, 18, the latest one, that's when then they've changed, obviously, the interior as well. And when I'm looking at it by today's standards, it's still doing a great job. By today's standards, I mean looking at the segment as well, because this is a segment that I believe it replaced what used to be hatches as first car buyer's choice, and then now we're leaning towards small SUVs because the world is just looking at that. I mean, this car itself, it's like a strategic vehicle for Ford. It's one of the most strategic because I believe they've seen that the world is shifting towards SUVs, and by bringing a small SUVs, they fell into this segment that is competing a lot. You can see that since this car was introduced in 2013, there have been a lot that came through, and I'm looking at now the Kia Sonet, Toyota Urban Cruiser, you know, there's Vitara Brez, there's Nissan Mac-9, there's Cherry Tiggo 4 Pro as well, there's Renault Kiger, there's Hyundai Venue. I mean, there's a lot of cars in this segment. And when I'm looking at them, saying to their standards, I'm looking like this dash, it's actually fighting a lot. Considering that this car has been around for quite some time, it still looks rather amazing. This steering wheel, you should feel this steering wheel. I believe it's one of the best steering wheels to feel, not only in this segment, but also in just general. This is a nice steering wheel to feel. Looking at the screen as well, this is a crisp looking screen, I have to say. But you can see from the instrument cluster here that, you know what, people are leaning more towards digitalized and funky instrument clusters, but this one, of course, is still analog. So that's where you can see that at least there's still a little bit of age in it. But looking at it and the segment, I don't feel like it has a lot of age in it. This is a timeless interior, looking at the fact that it's been there for quite some time, and it was joined by people in 2022, and it's still very much appealing as a good interior. So you need to memorize how this car drives, because when you get to the gravel road, I'm going to be talking about both sides on tar and on gravel. But there's one area that I think one might be worried, because, you know, it's 2022 and this car has been around for quite some time, and that is like tech and features. You know, I think there is two sides to this, because by 2022 standards, a mid to top spec car, you're expecting certain things to be there. Like, for example, this car doesn't necessarily open like with keyless and doesn't have keyless entry, but I'm going to talk about that. There's a way to bypass it. You know, you still need to put in the key to start the car. Manualized lights as well, you know, headlights. There's no rain sensing wipers. When you look at the aircon controls here, manual, you know, everything else I can say it's manualized, the seats and so on. But there's still things that I think it brings back in, because like I said, keyless entry, you can still get it via FordPass. This car has FordPass, which was introduced in October 21 in the Trend and the Titanium models. Because this is based on the Trend, of course it has FordPass. FordPass, I've done a detailed video on that. You can go check it out. It's amazing. You can start the car remotely. You know, you can unlock the cars. You can see like other things like fuel that is remaining, the range and so on. So there's quite a number of things that you can do. That is modern tech. I mean, you come in, the seats has lumbar support, the screen as well is crisp, you know, Android Auto CarPlay, they're still in there as well, you know. So there are things that are contributing a lot to, you know, bringing it at least going back that, you know, lost ground on 2022 standards. But to get much more tech, you can still add that 8,000 that I mentioned, and then you go into the Titanium, you get much more like rain sensing wipers, you get auto headlights, a semi-digital cluster, you know, you get 7 speakers, keyless push start, electronic aircon and so on. So those are the things that then can at least get you to 2022 level. All right, so we're on gravel now, and one thing special about this road is that it's in my hometown, and I've traveled quite a long stretch to get here. It's quite far actually. Now it's giving me confidence that I can talk about how this car drives like on the highway long distance drive. For a 1 liter 3-cylinder, I have to start by saying, yeah, it actually gave me smiles. That's how I'm going to put it. It gave me smiles. And I don't think it's only contributed to the engine. This engine is giving out like 92 kilowatts and 170 Newton meters of torque. But I have to talk about this transmission. The thing about long distance traveling is that there's a lot of changes to the slope on the road as you're going and going and going, right? And when I first got this car, I just drove it for like 5 kilometers and just left it. And then I did a long distance afterwards, going to Limpopo. I was with like 3 other passengers who were adults basically. And then I was the 4th one. And the boot was packed. This is a 3 liter boot. Actually, it's not the biggest boot, because when I'm looking at the competition as well, I think it's probably one of the lowest in terms of size, because it's not necessarily the lowest, because the Urban Cruiser and the Vitara Brezza, they're coming at around 328 liters, but this one is 333 liters. When I'm looking at the Tiggo 4 Pro, it is 340. I'm looking at the Kiger, which is the highest at 405, and then the Venue, which is around 350. But it depends on how the boot is. It's actually quite high, so you can pack up going high as well if you remove the load, that load cover thingy. But let's get back to the driving now. Looking at how this car handled that, because the boot was full, right? We had 4 people in the car, 4 people, meaning including myself. In this case, I hear, wow, this car can go. I was impressed by how actually it responded to that, because it didn't feel like it's struggling a lot to put in the power. And that's the thing that I keep thinking, how did they do that? Because it wasn't making a lot of noise in feeding the power, especially when you get to around 120, right? When you are picking up this speed, you can feel that it's uncomfortable. It feels like it's working hard because it's now full and so on. But once you get to the speed that you're looking for, let's say you get to 120 or you get to 100, and then you want to accelerate to 120 and above, you're overtaking. The way it fits in the power into the gas, wow. This is where I give so much respect to this transmission. This 6-speed auto made me to actually look at it and say, this is much better than the 10-speed that I've driven in the FX4. I've driven as well in the Raptor, because when I was in those, I could feel that the transmission is like it's confused a bit when it comes to the changing slopes on the ground, because it's giving you those vibes that are saying, you know, the moment you start going up a bit, it's already asking itself, should I go to gear 8, should I go to gear 7, or should I just keep myself at 10? But in here, it doesn't do that. It can feed in the power at gear 6, you know, changing from 120, overtaking, just as long as you are feeding the throttle gently and you're not necessarily just pressing, because if you just hold it quickly, it's obviously going to respond in a way that you're driving sporty, and I have to take it probably to gear 4 so that I can give you much more power, right? But if you're just gently driving and feeding the throttle just with the power properly, wow, it was responding so well. I was so impressed. It doesn't necessarily just fall back behind with other cars as well. If you're just trying to keep up with other cars, you know, there are cars obviously that are just much more powerful, especially when you're going up, that are just going to overtake you. But I was impressed by the way it's responding. The engine noise as well, it was just minimal, especially when you're just cruising at 120 going. It's just so minimal. Looking at the wind noise, the road noise, engine noise as well, this is a well-insulated cabin. When I'm comparing it to the other cars that I've mentioned, I can just single out the Tiggo 4 Pro and the Kia Sonet that I've driven as well, that they can at least be at this level, because this is a well-insulated car. The moment you start playing the sound system, it's like everything outside is cancelled. And this is something that I speak about when it comes to Ford. They managed to cancel exterior noises so well that I don't even know what else can I compare it with, because the moment you start playing the sound system, as much as it's not the best sound system out there, you know, the base of it, you know, you still need to get it only when you take the volume high up and so on. But when you just playing the sound system, it's like it does noise cancelling. I don't know how they do it. It's quite amazing how they do it actually. Let's get to the gravel road though. That's where then I'm going to have a little bit of, you know, I'm not as comfortable as I was on the tar road, because number one, I think this car, because it's sitting on low profile tires, you know, these are nice looking tires, they're low profile of course, they're not off-road. The moment I started doing high speed, because I was just trying to get to 100, which is the speed limit of course on the gravel road, getting to that, it was not as easy as I got in the Ranger and the Raptor. Of course it's expected, but that's because, you know, you feel that the traction control is trying to play games with you, in a sense of saying, correcting what you're doing when it's hitting like a big pool of sand that is just on, is it a pool? Wow, probably it is. When you're hitting a lot of sand on the road, you can feel that it's trying to correct you, and you really have to hold on to the steering wheel. You really have to hold on to it hard, because you can feel that, you know what, this I'm going to be working. It's not recommended for off-road, by the way, to hold it hard. But the thing is, the way it feels when you're just trying to shift from side to side and so on, you can feel that there is not much room for error on the off-road when it's driving at high speed. And that's the thing that I'm saying. For this car, on the road and everyday driving, it's quite amazing how it does it. And I believe it's probably one of the best in the range when you're looking at the competition as well that I've mentioned. But when I'm just looking at it on like gravel road like this, it's not necessarily the best in terms of driving, because you still have to protect a lot of it. And like I said, I think it's because of those low profile tires as well, because now there's plastics on the side, there's a little bit of rattling, and at the back, that spare wheel on the door I think is heavy, so it's making the rear door to be like rattling a bit, so it becomes a little bit uncomfortable and you feel like you have a lot more to protect than when you're on the road. That's how basically it feels on gravel. Otherwise, what I've done with this car as well is that when I looked at the fuel consumption, right? The fuel consumption of this car, it's quite funny. When I was coming here to Limpopo, I was driving, I was pushing this car, and it averaged just more than 7. And the full tank in here, actually, as I was driving here, this car actually got to a point where it says it's left with 80 liters and that's the reserve, and the light came on, and it did less than 500 kilometers on one tank. That is a 52 liter tank. That means we averaged more than 10 actually, if I'm looking at it. But when I went back to Pretoria, I was driving it like just, my top speed I think was around 125, 129, just below 130 of course. And when I looked at the range, you know, just around maybe half a tank managed to do more than 400 kilometers. And I have to say that's quite good, because it was averaging around I think 6.3, 6.8 I think, and Ford is claiming 6.3. So that's a good return if you think about it. So for fuel consumption wise, I have to say, if you drive it like you are a boy racer, it will also respond to you like that. But if you drive it sensibly, like I'm expecting from an EcoSport buyer, that's what you're gonna get. And that's one area I think it's also winning compared to the competition as well. Because if I think about a fierce competition that is coming from the Cherry Tiggo 4 Pro, it's lacking a lot when it comes to the fuel consumption, because the fuel consumption in the Tiggo is quite high. Overall though, what a product. I mean, this is an old vehicle, it's been around for some time, but it's still giving you a lot of value for money. At 393, it's still giving you a lot of value for money. It's a whole car. It feels more solid, more complete, especially compared to a lot of competition out there. As much as it still has a lot of competition that is going to give it a challenge, this is a car that is still worth looking into, and you can really buy this car as your first car. You can buy it, you know, as your small family car as well. I think it's really worth a check as well. But from me to you, that's all I have today, and thank you so much for being here with me today. Till next time, I am out.